deepest sense. Now, just to give you some background, this psalm was probably written about 722 BCE, just after Samaria fell. Now, Samaria was that town which was the capital of the northern kingdom, and it had fallen after a siege that lasted 3 years. You can imagine the horrors of being in a small city, a small town really, surrounded by the Assyrian troops for 3 years and finally having to give up and seeing the town leveled. And you can imagine also then that when this psalm was originally sung, the temple would have been filled not only with the people of Jerusalem in the south, but also the refugees in the north. People who had come down and were there and were telling the stories of the horrors that had taken place. And together they were singing, "God, stir up your might, come and save us." But it's interesting that as the writer got to this point of the psalm, something twigged in his mind, because the psalm suddenly veers off into a very unexpected direction. We've had this great outpouring of hope, and then we get, "You have fed us with the bread of weeping, and have given us tears in plenty to drink. You have made us a mockery to our neighbors, and our enemies laugh us to scorn." It's really as if the writer is saying, "Oh, all right, let's just wait a minute here. We know we're singing, we know we're praying, but what do we really expect? I mean, we've just had an absolute travesty take place just north of us. The people were displaced. The people were thrown out. The town was burned to the ground. And this, by the way, was not just the end of Samaria. It was the end of the northern kingdom completely. They'd taken the leaders, spread them throughout the Assyrian Empire. And these people, now refugees in Jerusalem, were not going to go home. They were homeless. They were refugees in the deepest sense of that word. So the writer here stops and says, yeah, we'd like things to happen, but we seem just to be crying. We seem just to be weeping. We seem to be overcome by the horror of the whole situation. What can we do? Does praying and singing really do any good? Is there really any hope? God of hosts, how long will you be angry with your people's prayer? Now that, by the way, is a good question for those in Jerusalem to ask at that time. It's also, let's be honest, a good question for us. Looking at our world today, as the writer of the psalm did, with complete honesty, what do we see? We see, as was mentioned in the prayer, our world with unrest, a world with racism, a world with civil wars taking place all over, one nation against the other, a large nation to our south in, I would say, political chaos right now. And then we look at our own lives, the community in which we live. There are people who are arguing, people who are fighting, people who aren't speaking to one another. At this time of the year, there's a lot of pain out there. I think it's very important that churches have services like your service here tonight, because, sometimes people feel out of place when we're talking about hope and everything, and they're sitting there and going, but, right now, I'm pretty hopeless. And I need a place where I can go and just be accepted for being who I am and where I am. And we can take that attitude. We can look around us and say, yeah, the world is a fairly gloomy place. What do we really expect here? What do we seek? Where does this hope that we talk about, that we put up at the front before us, that we light candles for, where does this really come from? And how can we grasp it when it gets here and know it for what it is? So by this time, the psalmist has picked himself up out of his depression. He's going on, "Let your hand rest on the one at your right hand, on the one you have made strong for yourself." God, you're the one who acts. In some way, give your strength into the world. And the people remembered that throughout history, they had found this presence of God in times of deepest need. When they needed strength in a leader, it came. When they needed strength in their community, it was found. When they needed strength in their own hearts, it was there. The psalm recalls the history of the people in Egypt, through the Red Sea. Yes, you've been with us, God. We remember that. And we hope that now you will strengthen someone in our midst to get us through this terrible time. And it was a terrible time. Samaria, by the way, was about 73 kilometers. That's about as far as it is to Carstairs from Jerusalem. So the threat was not off there somewhere. I guess we're north that way, aren't we? Where's north? There? There. Yeah. All right, that's north. They should have number or letters on the walls. So, they were there. And they needed to have leadership within their community who would give them the strength to face what was coming. Now, as Christians, of course, as we've already recognized this morning, we have seen one on whom God placed grace, and in whom God placed grace. We've met Jesus, and so we see, there's the one that God has strengthened to be our guide, to be our help in times of trouble in our world. Because God comes, and God continues to come. And when we speak about Christ, it's not an event that took place 2,000 years ago. The presence of that love that was in Jesus, that insight, that compassion, that strength, is something that God offers to us as we follow the path of Christ. There's a Spanish writer known as Juan Jimenez who wrote a wonderful short book called Paterno y Yo, Paterno and I. Now, Paterno, as you hear my little reading from the book, you'll have to imagine Paterno was a donkey, by the way. So it's the writer and his donkey, and they're out at sunset. And he writes just this one little paragraph, and I find it stunning. I stop in ecstasy before the twilight. Paterno, his dark eyes scarlet from sunset, walks off gently to a pool of rose and violet waters. He dips his mouth gently into the mirrors, which seem to turn liquid at his touch. The evening stretches out beyond itself, and the hour, touched with eternity, is infinite, peaceful, beyond sounding. It's a very simple moment. The skies didn't open. There was no large voice or loud thunder. It was a donkey taking water from a pool of sparkling water. And the hour, touched with eternity, is infinite, peaceful, beyond sounding. What that describes is, I believe very firmly, how God comes usually into our lives, how that presence of Christ is felt by us. It's not usually in the big things. It's in moments that come regularly, moments that surround us daily, in which suddenly we realize that the love that Paul said binds the universe together is there and holds us and gives us strength. God says, I lay my hands on you and lift you up. You can make it. You can do it. You are the body of Christ. And that is so meaningful and so powerful. And yet, so often in our lives, we miss these events. We miss these moments at the stoplight, driving our car, watching TV, walking in the mountains. We miss them because we're just too busy, or we're too upset, or we're too worried, or we're too anxious. We're always doing something else. We're rushing somewhere, or we're thinking something, or we're trying to do something or accomplish something. And God says, I am showing you peace. I'm showing you love. I'm showing you joy. I'm showing you hope. But you've got to pause for a moment and recognize it. See it. That's why church, whenever it's held, whenever the community comes together, is so absolutely vital to our lives. Not because of any particular thing we do here, but because this is a moment when you simply sit, you're not rushing anywhere. You shouldn't be worried about anything. This is a very safe place, one of the safest places around. Put the rest aside and wait for that moment that is touched by peace and eternity. And then you can take that moment out into the world. And you can find all those other moments that God puts along our way. I would say the best comparison I can get is like charging stations for your electric car. God knows how far you can go, and then there'll be something else touch you and say, all right, you need to recharge. I have an Apple Watch, and probably it's actually told me since I got here, but it will say, breathe. And then it gives you a little tingling on the wrist that tells you when to breathe in. And then it stops and you breathe out and you breathe in. My wife says, I got a husband who doesn't even know when to breathe unless his watch tells him. No, I don't do it every time. If you're driving down the road, I'll just stop now and breathe. But it's because it's important. It also tells me when to stand up, by the way. It didn't then, but it does. Because we need to stand every hour. And that's a physical thing. The muscles atrophy. And we need those reminders from life around us to stop, to put ourselves back in the presence of God. People will say, well, I don't sense God near me. I don't sense God with me. Well, it's because probably you never stopped to. You rush through the day, get to the end of the day and say, nope, God wasn't there. It was there. God's presence was there. Christ was with you 10, 20, 30 little times just for that moment. When you could breathe and say, okay, and now I'll go on. Let your hand rest on the one at your right hand, on the one you have made strong for yourself. Christ is there, God's hand upon Christ, and we are the body of Christ. That's what this meal is about. Then we will never forsake you. Give us life, and we will call on your name. I think life here is really just another word for hope. Give us that deep sense of life, that profound sense of life, that wondrous sense of life, that we are alive. We're a part of a universe. Some people look up in the sky, and they say, well, I feel very, very small and insignificant. No. What you feel is you're part of something tremendous and big, and you are here. You are the universe reflecting on itself. It's amazing. And you're held in that love that binds everything together. Now, unfortunately, the verse sounds almost backwards. Give us life, and we will call on your name. So, okay, God, give us what we want, and then we'll praise you. Sort of a deal, Give me what I want, and I'll go to church on Sunday. I don't like going to church, but I'll go to church on Sunday. But it's put in this order because this is the order it happens in. God gives us life. God continually, through the week, touches us, moves us, nudges us, sometimes smacks us because we're not paying attention. And then we can praise. We can give thanks because there's something to give thanks for, because we've seen through our own lives, through the life of the people of faith throughout the years, these moments of God's presence, and they lift us and hold us. And those moments come, I think, especially in times when we're sensing that we're distant from God, that we don't have what we need, that we're afraid of the future. At those moments especially, stop and pay attention, and the voice will be there. The insight will come. Often, we say, well, I don't know what I should be doing. And we go around and we tell everyone that. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. No, you don't. All right? We got that. Just get over that. Now, just step out and keep going. Oh, I can go here. All right. And go there. And slowly, life opens. Christ is with us. The other reading that was suggested for this morning to open this season of Advent is the reading from Mark's Gospel, Mark 13. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. That's the basic Christian discipline. that we do many things. We give, we help, we love, we share. All those things we do, and that's part of being a Christian. That's good. We're following Christ. We're doing as he did. But the basic discipline, what you've got to have before then, is the hope to do it. And that comes from staying awake to the presence of God around you, which strengthens you and allows you to do all the other things that you want to do. Martin Luther King, in one famous speech, said, "How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever." Even from Donald Trump. No, he didn't say that. Yeah. How long? Not long, because you still reap what you sow. Not long, because the arm of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long, because my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Advent. Jesus comes. How long? Not long. Christ is with us. The divine touches us. God's hand is upon us. We become the body of Christ and live in this world with joy, especially with that first element that we mentioned this Advent season, with hope. We remember that we've been touched before. We've been moved before. People have been with us before. The unexpected has happened before, and it will happen again and take us, maybe not where we expect to go, but it will take us always into a place where God is present. This Advent, we prepare for knowing that coming in the coming year, in the coming years of our lives, for being aware of God's love and responding to it with love for others. And by the way, for those of you who are still worried about the poor people of Jerusalem, the Assyrians at that point did not come. Yeah. Our eyes do see the glory of the coming of the Lord now, in our day, in our world, in our days. And for this, thanks be to God.